Hello and welcome to the first video I'm uploading on this channel. I've done YouTube videos in the past, but I've decided I create this one might as well for touching on some more slightly more advanced technology subjects, if you will. And for the subject of this first video, I would like to touch on a piece of software called Sheep Shaver. Here, I'll bring it over here for you. Um, for those of you who don't know what Sheep Shaver is, it's a classic Mac OS emulator here. And I want to go over not how to set it up. I maybe can do that in a later video perhaps, but I want to go over what it does, the impact it has on your machine performance-wise, and what can be done with it. So I guess we'll get right into it. For starters, despite me not showing you how to set it up, I will show you the stuff that you need. So you need to download Sheep Shaver. The link's not included. You can find those. Just use Google. You're going to need a ROM. You can get that from your own Macintosh, or you can do a Google search to find that yourself. You're going to need a copy of Mac OS 9 or 8. I think the maximum supported is Mac OS 9.2, but for this experiment, we're using Mac OS 9.0.4. And then you're going to need to download another piece of software. I forget what it's called, forgive me, but you can easily find a tutorial video, and that's why I'm not really doing one yet, is because I'm not sure if it's really necessary. So we will now begin starting up Sheep Shaver. As you can see here, this is the Sheep Shaver GUI. You can start it from this application here, but I prefer to start it from here so I can configure the machine before start. What this does here is this is where you can add floppy disks, CD-ROMs, or your boot drive. Right there, this is my boot drive. Here's your graphics and sound. You can select what resolution you want the window to be, or if you want it full screen. This is settings for your mouse and keyboard. Serial, if you have use for that. Networking, it does work. You can set how much memory you want your virtual machine to have. And then I'm not really sure what this does. So we'll get right into starting it. And typically when you start, you'll get this message here. I think it's because it doesn't have a CD-ROM driver, but that's insignificant. And everything's starting on my other monitor, so forgive me. Oop, last time I used it, I guess I Alt F4'd or used Task Manager. So it's starting up here, and while it's starting up, I'd like to demonstrate the performance impact it has on my machine here. So this is a test machine that I use. It's running an Haswell i3, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and a Radeon RX 570. Of course, my recording software is using hardware encoding on my GPU, so that's why you're seeing usage there. But Sheep Shaver takes up little to no memory here unless you're loading it. Or what I mean by load is if you're doing something in it that's going to cause load. And then it uses a considerable amount of CPU because you are emulating a PowerPC processor. So we'll minimize that. Now what you'll notice is that it operates just like Mac OS 9. Here we'll open up about this computer. 512 megabytes of memory. RAM disk is disabled. I believe that's what that is, and you can see it's 9.0.4. And Apple System Profiler. It thinks we are a Power Macintosh 9500. It thinks we're running a 100 megahertz PowerPC G4 processor. As mentioned before, we are running 512 megs of RAM. And what's cool here is you can see the device here. It's a 2 gigabyte. You make it yourself when you set up the virtual machine. And then you can also access your files. You're on your C drive here. And I'll get into that later. 1600 by 900, millions of colors. Then a built-in display card. It just says Sheep Shaver video. and 490 megs of VRAM. That's very insignificant, however. Here's your control panels and such, and extensions, application, and system folders here. Your typical Mac OS 9 stuff. And so maybe I'll go in a later video demonstrating the performance within the virtual machine. As it says, uh, it is trying to emulate a 100 megahertz PowerPC G4. I'm not very familiar with the PowerPC line of processors, but I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I'm pretty sure there is no such thing as a 100 megahertz PowerPC G4. As you can see here, I was trying to run the Sims, but maybe we'll get that working in a later video. There's no real applications installed. You have just a regular word processor here. FM radio, CD player, network browser, and a QuickTime, of course. Your typical apps that come with an installation of OS 9. Now I do want to demonstrate this feature here of SheepShaver. I currently have 3 drives in my computer, but the neat thing about this is you're able to enter any of them, and so you can download any of your stuff, any stuff you want to use in SheepShaver, you can download it to a folder on any of your selected drives, and you can access it via SheepShaver in OS 9, which makes loading software into the VM much faster. Now, I will mention that there is some degree of instability. Some applications will just straight up crash the machine. I've used it in the past, but I've gotten a lot of games, whether that be 2D games and 3D games, to very limited success. I have gotten them to run fine, and this is a viable option for emulating um, a, uh, uh, a PowerPC processor. Of course, you have all of the access to all of the typical stuff. I mean, it's a very vanilla install of Mac OS 9. Well, I guess we'll shut it down now. I want to thank you guys for coming along with me. And it shuts down just like that. But I would like to thank you guys for coming along with me checking out SheepShaver. It's a pretty old piece of software. It's been around for a while, and I think it's very fascinating, and I hope you guys think so too. It was very nice, and I will catch you guys in the next one.